we are going to be presenting some new work that Aditi and I have been working on suicide prevention in the Army. The context for this problem is a really disturbing and severe one. Death by suicide is much greater problem in the Army than it is in the civilian population. And unfortunately, death by suicide has been increasing pretty dramatically in the last several years in the Army. And one of the points for intervention is really if people are disclosing their suicidal ideation to people within their social networks. This is a moment in time when people are being vulnerable, and when then, because of that moment of vulnerability, services can potentially be rallied around that person and help can be provided to try to prevent that suicide from becoming a death. Now, unfortunately, death investigation records in the Army would suggest that only about a third of people disclose to somebody in their network. So the purpose of this study was really to do some data mining of social network data of folks in the Army to try to understand to whom do people disclose and to whom do people not disclose their suicidal thinking, so that we can try to design new interventions and hopefully find new intervention insights as a result of this work that might inform future suicide prevention efforts. So what we are going to be doing with this, and I'll let Aditi deal with most of the technical details, but we, with these data, have, within these social network data, we have multi-level data. So we have individual level information from these surveys from these soldiers, and we also have detailed information about their social network connections. And so we're using decision trees, which is a very transparent and interpretable form of machine learning, to look at the factors that we see with suicidal disclosure within these nested data structures. And this is a unique application, and to our knowledge, no one has used decision trees in these nested data structures with network data before. Last thing I'll say before turning it over to Aditi is that we surveyed in 2019, and Haley Weintraub-Nadel, who's around here somewhere, was actually with me on base collecting data from soldiers. 241 active duty soldiers. They told us about 2,000 of their network connections, and we have detailed information that you can see here. We ended up having about 40 different variables that we looked at that cut across these individual level factors as well as the network level factors, particularly things like their military experiences around being deployed, their demographics around race and gender, et cetera, and then the nature of their social networks, like who gives them support, how frequently do they communicate with people, and the like. Go ahead.
So, in order to deal with this problem, we wanted a methodology that has two features. First up, it is transparent and we see the interaction between each features. And second up, we wanted something that can understand the hierarchical nature of the data. And for this, we went with GLMM trees, which is generalized linear mixed model trees. These are especially beneficial in this case because they have two kinds of effects, which is fixed and random, which can help accommodate the hierarchical nature of the data that we have. Before this, we also did some feature engineering, some removal of features that were redundant and so on. This is the basic 80-20 split that we had, so that we used 80% of the data for training and 20% to test. And we also used k-fold cross-validation in order to know that the splits were not lucky and the model consistently performs on the entire data. So these are the results that we have. We have a training accuracy of 90 and test accuracy of 85. And what really stood out is the AUC score, which is 0.93, which usually categorizes in the excellent quality. And this essentially means that if we pick a positive instance out of all the data points, the model will place the positive instance above the negative instance 93% of the times. So essentially, the model truly understands the difference between a positive and a negative instance. This is the decision tree that we found, and it is very easy to interpret, as in every node is a subset of people, and every path that we follow to reach that node is the kind of feature that the subset of people represent. Sample is how many people are there in that category, and the probability of disclosure is what is the probability that they will tell people about their self-harm or suicide-related thoughts. And these are the nodes that we can look for. So as you can see for node 10 and 19, we see that the sample percentages are very different, but the disclosure probability are high. Now, this can be attributed to the features and the path that they travel to reach that node. And the other side is where we have similar sample sizes, but we have very different probability of disclosures. And as we can see, the probability of disclosure for node 3 is very less. That is because these are the people who did not receive any kind of support. And for 15, we see that it is very high because these are the kind of people who received both the type of supports. And over to Eric to explain this more in depth.
Yeah. What's really great about this kind of work is the intervention insights that you can gain from it. So when you're thinking about designing a new behavioral health intervention, what we're oftentimes thinking about as what will make for a good intervention is, can you find some social factor, so to speak, or some variable that is mutable, right? Something that we could change. And also, if you make that change, does it have a big impact? And so really, we get pay dirt as an interventionist if we can find something that we can change and that has a big impact. And in fact, that last bit of nodes that Aditi was showing is exactly the sort of thing that we're hoping to find as an intervention scientist, right? So when you had the 6% disclosure with that one group that had neither form of social support from those nodes, like that's a losing proposition right there, right? But if you can get people to have both informational and emotional support from a particular member of their network, they're very highly likely to disclose suicidal thinking to that person. And so what we think of as being mutable is when you've got one of those but not the other. And what we can see here is that if you've got only informational support or only emotional support, your likelihood to disclose isn't that much better than flipping a coin, or maybe even not that good, right? But if we can get both, then we can really ramp things up. So for us now, the next step as a social work researcher is actually designing an intervention that works with people, to work with their network connections. And especially I was in a meeting that Lindsay Young held a couple of weeks ago, where the suggestion was made by the audience to me that really this opens up an opportunity for us to direct our social network interventions to the network members. So instead of putting all of the burden on the person who is in emotional distress, if we can find early on who these supportive people are, we can really start to design programs around them to be helping people who are going to be in distress in the future, and having the burden be on our friends, not ourselves that are in distress. So thanks for your time and attention.